They basically were arguing that the SEC's theory of Howey could contravene like their own consumer protection laws and potentially preempt them. So it's very important that these states spoke up, and I think that the court will weigh their brief pretty heavily.
This content is brought to you by Uphold, which is a great crypto platform that I've been using since 2018. Uphold has all the top cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin, and all the altcoins. In fact, they have 260 plus cryptocurrencies on their platform. You can also trade precious metals, stablecoins, and 37 fiat currencies. In addition, they are available in over 150 countries. And this platform is fully reserved. They do audits, so you can trust that your funds are safe, no commingling, no lending out your funds. If you'd like to learn more about Uphold, please visit the link in the description. Welcome to the Thinking Crypto podcast, your home for cryptocurrency news and interviews. With me today is Marisa Coppel, who's the head of legal at the Blockchain Association. Marisa, welcome back.
Thanks so much, Tony. Good to be back.
Marisa, I got to have you on at least maybe once per month because, you and the folks at the Blockchain Association are doing a lot on behalf of the crypto industry, amicus briefs and much more. And you obviously have a great perspective on all things legal and what's been taking place. Let's start with the SEC versus Kraken and Kraken fighting back. And I saw the Blockchain Association filed an amicus brief on behalf of Kraken. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, we filed a brief with the DeFi Education Fund. So it was, jointly filed by the two organizations. And we really just argued that the SEC's theory of Howey is not correct and does not comport with what the law says. They've had this recent theory that we've been calling the ecosystem theory, where they essentially allege that if there's an ecosystem that supports or that contributes to like the value of a token going up or down, then that means that there's an investment contract. And our brief really debunks that. Like it would be pretty absurd to think that any asset that's surrounded by an ecosystem is a security. One good example is like the Pokemon ecosystem, or Barbie is another one, where there's people that are very invested in a brand and they buy the asset of the brand. So like a Barbie doll or Pokemon card, but that asset obviously is not a security. So there's really just like no limiting principle on the SEC's version of Howey, and we outline that in our brief.
So Marisa, you mean the LeBron James rookie card I have, if LeBron James keeps playing better and hitting records, that becomes a security because he's increasing the value for me?
According to Gary Gensler.
Unbelievable. Now, Marisa, this is not the first go around with Kraken and the SEC, and I find it absurd that the SEC sued them over the staking. They paid a fine of about $50 million. A year later, the SEC comes back and says, here's another lawsuit. We're throwing a bunch of tokens in this lawsuit. I mean, is this odd that this is happening?
I mean, it's reflective of the SEC's strategy as it comes to the crypto industry, right? Like, I don't think Kraken anticipated that they would get another lawsuit, and I'm sure that they settled the staking related lawsuit like in, good faith and trying to work with the agency. The thing that was so problematic about that settlement is the agency essentially required them to shut down their staking program, which besides the millions of dollars they had to pay, like normally when a company is settling with an agency, the agency will try to work with the company so they can continue, doing like whatever the business is or working with their current product, even if it has to be modified. But in that instance, it was just like, shut it down. And then, it's very unfortunate that they came back. I think it was less than a year later with a lawsuit that largely mirrors the Coinbase lawsuit and the Binance lawsuit. It really touches on the secondary markets issue.
Mm.
Obviously, the staking claims are not in this lawsuit because Kraken had already settled those claims. So it's really the secondary markets issue in this one. But I know Kraken is, fighting it with everything it has. So I think that the SEC is not going to have an easy time. That's for sure.
And Marissa, something I've been thinking about, and I have a question for you on this. They threw these bunch of different tokens in these lawsuits, but they aren't giving those tokens or litigating them directly or giving them due process. So is there a way to push back on that in the courts to say, hey, you can't just throw a bunch of random tokens? It's not like what they did with Library or even Ripple. It's directly with the project. They're just saying
Right.
throwing anything at the wall here. Can that be pushed back on?
Yeah, and we do push back on that in our brief. I mean, it started with the Wahi case where the SEC brought an insider trading case against three individuals for insider trading or allegedly insider trading certain tokens, but then the token creators were not party to the lawsuit, and there's no way for like a third party essentially to intervene in an SEC enforcement action.
Mhm.
And we made that argument in the brief that we filed in the Wahi case. And then we again like made a similar one here. And it's again reflective of the SEC's strategy when it comes to this industry. It's I think there's a due process issue with that.
Mhm.
It's all that these token creators could do is like file an amicus brief. But why would they do that? Why would they come forward if the SE like it puts another target on their back, you know?
Mhm.
Um, so I just think it's disingenuous of the agency to do that and does not create a culture that fosters innovation and like celebrates this technology, and it makes it even harder for entrepreneurs to develop products.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I was really surprised about was eight state attorney generals came out while they didn't 100% support Kraken. They were saying this is not the way to go about it. What the SEC is doing is not right. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I thought it was awesome that they came out and filed an amicus brief in the case. They basically were arguing that the SEC's theory of Howey could contravene like their own consumer protection laws and potentially preempt them. So it's very important that these states spoke up, and I think that the court will weigh their brief pretty heavily. At least I hope the court will, because it's not in every case that other, governments will weigh in.
Mhm.
So it means that something egregious must have happened here.
Oh man, it's sometimes I get so discouraged because this is the government doing this. Sometimes a private company or something that's doing it, you'd be like, all right, people, there's bad actors everywhere, but the government, you don't expect that, right? You expect them to follow the law and to
Yeah, I mean, maybe I'm jaded from my time as a practicing some criminal defense law, but the government does not always do the right thing. So that is definitely happening here.
Now, there was also a recent settlement between ShapeShift and the SEC, pretty small, but also egregious in my opinion, because are they retroactively going after companies now? Because the business model of ShapeShift changed years ago, and it just seems strange. And Hester Person, Mark Ueda, commissioners came out against this. What were your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that this has been negotiated for a while.
Hmm.
I don't know that for sure. Obviously, that's just speculation, but it wasn't such a high number. So it makes me think that the investigation had been ongoing for a long time and that ShapeShift had hired really great lawyers and was able to negotiate a pretty favorable settlement.
Hmm.
There was also some language in the settlement order that was pretty interesting that almost made it sound like the actions that the SEC was condemning like stopped once ShapeShift shifted its business model to become decentralized. So that was like somewhat promising, and maybe I'm just like too much of an optimist and reading between the lines there too much. But I appreciated that there was like some recognition of like that shift to decentralization rather than, thinking that it's the same, like the shapeshift entity is the same as like the community managed version of shapeshift.
Mm. Man, nothing surprises me anymore. I just feel like the SEC is running amok here. I don't. I have my standards, my expectations have all been lowered. I'm like, they would do anything at this point, but hopefully that changes. Now, there's also SOB 121, and we saw members of Congress looking to get that repealed. There was a vote to get that repealed. It still has to go to the House floor. And then I saw some banks sent a letter to the SEC, advising they can't custody the Bitcoin ETFs. I believe it's related to SOB 121. What are your thoughts on what's happening there?
Yeah, I mean, SAB 121, like, I think is an APA violation in and of itself. Like, they should have put that through notice and comment and get public opinion before they released the guidance. It reads almost like a rule. But the vote on the House floor, I don't believe has been scheduled yet. So it's possible that it would take place in April or May, but I don't think we have a core date. There was also a speech by the FDIC vice chair yesterday, and he mentioned SAB 121 and how it should have gone through the public comment process, and also how, it doesn't make sense to essentially limit who can custody digital assets and like exclude the banks from that, when like the banks obviously are highly, highly regulated entities. And, in theory, it would be safe for a customer to custody their crypto with a bank, given how like highly regulated it is. We all know that like there's bank failures and banks are not, as safe as they might portray themselves to be. And that's why we're all in the crypto industry. But yeah, I mean, we'll see what happens with it and what happens with the CRA vote. Hopefully it gets repealed.
Yeah, for sure. Um, Now, with regards to the EIA versus Bitcoin miners and that survey emergency survey they were trying to push out there, what are your thoughts on that? Did the Blockchain Association participate in any way as well from that front?
Yeah, so we didn't file the lawsuit or participate in it. That was the Texas Blockchain Council that filed it, along with, I believe, one of its members. And it was just an awesome effort on their part. Like they won their temporary restraining order. I believe that they got the preliminary injunction.
Hmm.
But it just shows the power of advocacy in the courts, right? And like that is a tool that we have to push back on overzealous regulators.
Yeah. It's unbelievable what's happening. But, one of the good things that we saw, I was just talking to Eleanor Terra of Fox Business about this on Super Tuesday. Pro crypto candidates started winning, those who were running against candidates who were aligned to Elizabeth Warren. So that was a nice victory. So I'm optimistic that even though we're seeing all these attacks, we're headed in the right direction and on the path to victory. Um, I don't know if you have any thoughts on the elections, but that in itself is a whole other world. But
Yeah, I mean, I'm like, a liberal Democrat, so this is where I have an internal conflict because obviously we know that like Biden's administration has not been good for crypto, and certainly not Elizabeth Warren. Like that is the most disappointing one. I used to be a Warren fan, and now I'm not because I just think her positions on crypto really like make little sense in light of her other positions. Like she's very against big banks. So you would think that she would be in favor of a technology that takes the power away from big banks. But then on the flip side, she like wants the government to control everything. And obviously the government can't control or can only control crypto to some extent, right?
hmm.
Um, But yeah, we'll see what happens in November. I feel like I have no faith in polling after the Trump Clinton election when all the polls favored Clinton and then Trump won anyway. So we'll see what happens. I'm trying not to hinge my thoughts on one particular candidate. But it
Yeah,
is cool to see that the candidates are like that crypto is an issue that people are talking about. Like that just demonstrates that the country cares about the direction of digital assets and voters talk. So I think that that's very powerful.
yeah, and it's fascinating because at one point it seemed like crypto was more of a Republican thing, but now I'm seeing more Democrats popping up. Even the recent
Totally.
victory, Democrats supporting crypto, and there's many voices rising up now. I think the problem has been historically Elizabeth Warren's voices over it has drowned out
Right.
the rest of the Democrats, but I'm starting to see more of them coming out, being more vocal. So that's a good thing. Like I'm talking to Wiley Nickel, Congressman
Oh
Wiley
yeah.
Nickel this week, and he's a Democrat and he supported the
Totally.
repeal of Sub 121. So it's great to see there's balance on both sides now. And it's not just, okay, Republicans are for crypto.
Oh, for sure.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah, definitely. And like I believe that crypto really aligns with progressive values. Like it creates a more equitable internet, essentially. So like I think that more Democrats should be on board than there are, but we certainly have some champions. Like Richie Torres is another example. He's awesome. So it's great to see that there's bipartisan support.
for sure. Now, I forgot to bring up because we were talking about exchanges earlier, but I guess this is related more to the Ethereum situation. We saw just this past week, CFTC Chairman Rostin Benham was talking about the dynamic between the CFTC and the SEC as it relates to the Ethereum asset. CFTC views it as a commodity. However, Chair Gensler refuses to reiterate what his predecessors, Jay Clayton and Bill Hinman, have said about Ethereum. There's many questions as to if an Ethereum ETF is going to be approved. Well, enter Lejilex and the Crypto Freedom Alliance of Texas suing the SEC to say what's a security, what's not, are secondary market sales securities. What do you think about this lawsuit?
Yeah, so this is an instance where somebody went on the offensive, and the arguments are similar to the arguments that are being raised in the enforcement actions that the SEC has brought against like Coinbase and Kraken, but it's just flipped. So now the SEC is the defendant, and Legilex, which is a company that built an exchange and has not like released it to the public yet because the company fears enforcement, reasonably so, given that there are many lawsuits against other exchanges.
Right.
Um, so it's very proactive and I think an incredible effort on the part of Legilex, and Legilex belongs to the trade association located in Texas. So I think that it's great to see a company go on the offensive and not be afraid to fight.
Marissa, I don't know if you can answer this question, and I'm a rookie when it comes to this states' rights versus the federal government rights and so forth. Can a local securities, if this exists, like local securities agency to states, differ from the federal government SEC? Is that a thing? Like can a state in Texas say,
Like the state laws, can they
yeah.
differ from federal laws? Yes, but there's certain aspects of the federal laws that will preempt state laws.
Hmm. So here's a mock scenario, and you tell me if I'm off base here. Just for let's say Ethereum, the state of Texas and all these guys, their local securities, local government, and so forth are like, this is a commodity. All exchanges and people in Texas can trade this. Go for it. But the SEC itself is unclear, or maybe they come out and say it is a security. Could that be a problem between the state and the and federal government where they can sue each other or do something? What would happen in this situation?
That if they were trading it on like a website that crossed state lines, and essentially if there was like interstate commerce, like the federal government securities laws would probably control. But I'm not an expert on like the state versus federal securities laws issues, but generally the SEC is like the securities regulator of the country.
That has me thinking, could there be like decentralized exchanges that are entities that exist in every state, but they're not connected, the liquidity or the market is not connected to the nationwide. I don't know. Anyway, but that's probably a business model that could be down the future.
Yeah, potentially. I think it would be very hard, but we can certainly keep talking about it.
For sure, for sure. Cool. Is there anything else you guys are, the Blockchain Association paying attention to? I know there's bills in the House. Patrick McHenry wants to get those through, stable coins. Anything that's on your radar?
Yeah, I mean, I think that you mentioned them. Stable coins is definitely a big one, and same with Patrick McHenry's market structure bill. That's also a big one. So we're just, keeping our eye on those, and of course, like we'll keep the community updated as there are bigger updates. We're always like very concerned, especially now with like national security issues. So we've been working on some of that stuff too. My colleague, Sarah Milby, who's our head of policy, is really driving the strategy there. But that's like a big focus for us this year.
Oh, sure. So I think I saw it. Ron Hammond, I think your colleague posted something this morning about that, and that Russia and China are looking to build I don't know, stablecoin or CBDC. So the global competition against the US dollar, it's in motion, and they're going to use this new technology to build a new reserve currency, possibly a new currency for trading. So the US really needs to get its act together here, and hopefully, man, this is the year. But I know the elections make things crazy, so I don't know.
I know, it's so true. And I hope that we do get our act together with all of it so we don't fall behind further than we already are.
For sure. Marissa, always a pleasure. Thank you for the insightful information, and thank you for joining me.
Yeah, thanks so much, Tony.